this is James, and I'm here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting February the 12th, 2018. With Valentine's Day falling on the calendar this week, I wanted to work with one of my loved theme decks. So the deck that I've chosen to assist me for this week's reading is the Psychic Tarot for the Heart Oracle deck. It is by psychic medium John Holland. The artwork is by John Matson, and it is published by Hay House. So I have the deck on hand, and I'm going to take a moment to shuffle the cards. And as I shuffle the cards, I'm focusing on my usual intention and question for these general readings, and that is, what do we need to know for the week ahead? Now I'm going to take a moment to shuffle the cards my other way. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. And at this point, I was contemplating how I wanted to do this week's reading, so one of the things that came to my mind was to take the bottom card from the deck, and that will serve as the underlying influence or the root or the foundation for the other cards that we will select. So now let's get to that. We're going to fan the cards out now. And when I work with tarot, I usually do a 3-card reading, so I'm going to be looking for 3 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. Here's number 2, and a card wanted to come out with number 2, so I'll take that as number 3. All right, so I'm putting the rest of the deck to one side. And so now I have the 3 cards, and so now let's take a look at the card that was at the bottom of the deck. So here we have, red border 1. So the interesting thing about this deck is that all the suits have a different colored border. So the red border cards represent our relationship with our material world. So that's how I'm going to be looking at each card. Each card is going to be telling us the area of our lives that we are relating to this week. And so strengthening bonds is the first card from this particular suit. And so this could represent a new source of security. I tend to look at the red border having to do with resources, things having to do with material concerns. So that could be our physical well-being, our financial well-being, our work or career aspects of our lives, so things of that nature. But when this card shows up, it represents something new or the potential for something to develop or grow in the future. For me, I tend to look at this as seeds being planted. So this could be the week where, no matter what the other cards are highlighting, that we are putting some energy into planting seeds for the future, right? So this is all about intention. So if you're wanting to create a different or a new experience in your material world, what seeds do you need to plant? What intentions do you need to create that's going to allow that future growth and development that you're wanting to experience, right? So could be the week to be thinking about that. The other thing with this card could be about engaging in things that are rewarding or fulfilling. And again, it's the same thing. Where in life do you feel a sense that it could be more rewarding or fulfilling for you? And would you be willing to create a new intention around that? And then, here's the thing about intentions. I'm a big believer that a relationship is formed between intention and action. So if you're going to be creating a new intention, what actions do you need to take that are going to be in alignment with that new intention, right? So there is that. And for some people in particular, I'm seeing strengthening bonds. So if we're talking about relationships now, remember I talked about Valentine's Day and using a love-themed deck, and this deck is a deck that's best, or its theme rather, is about relationships. So this could be relationships across the board, right? I tend to keep it real general when I'm talking about relationships because not everybody is in a partnered relationship, right? So we need to honor that. So strengthening bonds could just be about what would you need to do to create stronger bonds with the people that you connect to, with the people that you relate to, you know? Or even the other areas in your life in which you are forming relationships. You know, I talked about our physical well-being. Well, we have relationships with our body, you know? Do you need to form a stronger bond with in your relationship with your physical body? You know, we talked about finances. Do you need to form a stronger bond with your relationship with money? You know, believe it or not, that is a relationship. You know, so what is it that you need to kind of create a stronger bond between you and whatever the other party is in that relationship, right? This is the week to do that. Now let's take a look at the first card. Okay, and this may be why. So here we have Indigo 3, which is sadness and isolation. So the indigo border represents mental activity. So this is the mind. So here we have our relationship with our mind, our mental energy this week. And so sadness and isolation can come up when we may be experiencing a sense of hurt. For me, this card is about hurt, pain, you know, that kind of thing, and going through the healing process with that, right? Now, in terms of relationships, sometimes this card can come up when we are needing to consider the idea of severance, right? I tend to look at this as severing things. So it could be like maybe needing to kind of cut ties with particular individuals, and that's going to create the sense of sadness. It could be, I'm being reminded, like last week I had talked about an individual who might be needing to have a difficult conversation with somebody with this idea of ending something once and for all and then moving on, right? You know, and so that could be a part of that. Somebody knows they need to move on, but they're also feeling a sense like that move is going to create a sense of isolation. It could even be that somebody is moving on, and they're moving on in a way that's going to allow them a greater sense of independence, but at the same point in time, the independence is a wonderful thing, but there may be some sense of sadness with that. Or they're going to be moving to a place in which they're going to be all by themselves. Like this idea of like moving to a place where you have no connection, which means that you don't know anybody, you don't have any family who's already there, and that could be somewhat challenging, right? So I'm seeing those kinds of aspects with the Indigo 3, sadness and isolation. So it could just be a matter of a person is going through some sort of painful experience and you're working through healing that. And I want to say this. There is a phrase, and it's a little bit of a cliche, but it fits with this card. That idea of time healing all wounds. And so it could just be a matter of you needing to give it time, right? So there is that. It could be somebody, again, is creating some ways of severing connections or severing ties to either a person or people, to an experience, to a condition, to a circumstance, right? So there is that. You know, the idea of giving that some thought. It could also be, too, that somebody is moving on, and they may be moving to a geographic location in which they are all by themselves, right? And so it's a happy time, but it's also a kind of sad time, because on some level, the happy side of it is you are gaining your independence, right? You may be all out on your own, and that may also be the rub. You may be in an area where you don't know anybody, and so it fosters this sense of isolation, right? The other thing that I want to say about this card, because I'm seeing a different card in my head, and so for some people, it may be a matter of having a conversation, again, that idea about having a difficult conversation coming up, and it may be a matter of clearing the air. There may have been some sort of misunderstanding, a sense of confusion about something, maybe something that was spoken, and we are taking some energy into clearing the air, right? And so it's a result of having some sort of miscommunication though, right? So I'm seeing that with sadness and isolation. Now moving to the middle card. And here we have, okay, so here we have green 5, change your focus. So the green border represents our emotional well-being. So this is the suit that represents feelings, emotions, and relationships. Now, I talked with the idea here about clearing the air, clearing some misunderstanding, that kind of thing, clearing it up, right? Clearing up some kind of confusion. And this is why. Because the green 5 card can represent, on some level, going through a disappointing time. In relationships, when this card comes up for me, it usually represents being disappointed with other people. And usually the disappointment is because they did not live up to our expectations, right? And that could be twofold. Number one, it could be a matter of our expectations being too high, right? And then if that's the case, then people don't measure up. People will never ever measure up, if our expectations are too high. right? So that is one possibility. Another possibility here is that the people that we place those expectations on could never fulfill them because they were unrealistic, right? You know, sometimes we set the bar too high for certain people, and certain people can't fulfill certain expectations, right? And then the other aspect of it is that maybe they could fulfill the expectation, but they were just not willing to, right? So we have all these different kinds of things to consider when we place expectations on other people, and also too, when expectations are placed on ourselves. Other people may be placing expectations on us that aren't realistic, that we can't fulfill, that either we can't because we don't have the skill set to do it, or that we are unwilling to do it. And those are two different ways, right? The can't would be just a matter of skill set. I'm not equipped to do it. But the unwillingness could be, I could very well do it, and I'm just not going to. And so that's a different kind of thing, right? So maybe even there's this situation that needs to be cleared up around expectations, right? Because I have this, because I'm very left-brained, so I have these almost like a mathematical equation when it comes to disappointment. So here it is. It's usually expectation minus reality equals disappointment. So what happens is we have this expectation, and then reality sets in. And then as a result of reality setting in, we get disappointed, right? So it could be a matter of, and since I like the title being change your focus, because this is the focus card, this is the center card. So what is it that we need to change? You know, would we be willing to change it? Change our focus. We may be focusing on what it is that we've lost, or what it is that we can't get, or what it is that we're not receiving, but maybe change your focus is saying, but what are you getting? What are you receiving? What do you still have, right? So there is that. And I'm just throwing this out there as a possibility. I usually don't talk about this, but for someone, and this may be an urging for you, like if you're experiencing this, to maybe consider getting professional help. But sometimes the sadness and isolation card could be saying to, like, you're experiencing a physical loss. Somebody has transitioned, meaning that somebody has left this physical world and has returned to spirit. So somebody has transitioned, somebody has passed. And then with that, there's a sense of feeling like now you're on your own, like the person kind of left you behind. And then this card, Change Your Focus, is all about grieving and mourning that loss. So if that is you, if that makes sense and you're in that kind of space, I want to urge you, if it would help, for you to consider maybe talking to somebody who is a grief counselor, a therapist, something of that nature, because you may be needing some help or assistance in helping you move through that grief and mourning. And here's the other thing about that, because I talked about expectations. If you are going through something like that, then grief is unique to each and every one of us, right? And so if people are putting a timetable on that, you know, if they're expecting you to kind of just move beyond it or move through it, or you should have been over it by now, that's about them, right? Honor where you're at. It's your process, and however long it takes for you to move through it, that is okay. So that's what I want to say about that. And now that I talked about this idea about a transition and a loss, if it's not about a person transitioning, if we're making some kind of change, right? If we're going through some kind of disappointment, you know, we had this expectation and we didn't meet it, there could be a sense of needing to grieve and mourn that sense of loss, whatever that is, right? The downside with that is, you know, not allowing yourself to kind of wallow in that, right? And so for somebody in particular, because the green border can also represent healing, could be saying too, like, what would you be willing to do to kind of heal any regrets or remorse about that or about the past? Going with this idea here that I talked about with Indigo 3 about needing to clear up some kind of confusion or misunderstanding, you know? So there is that. So how can you work on healing any kind of regret or remorse that may be attached to that? So that is Green 5, Change Your Focus. So now let's take a look at the final card. And here we have, oh, this is a beautiful card to end on. So here we have Shine. So Shine is a major arcana card. So this card is the most important card on the table, right? This card highlights important issues or events. Now, Shine comes up when we need to work on clearing something up. So I like the idea that I talked about here with this sense of confusion or misunderstanding, because it needs to be cleared up, right? It needs to be cleared up. And the change your focus card, being the closest card to the shine card, is what would you need to change in your life that would allow you a greater sense of happiness, satisfaction, and fulfillment. So there is that. This card is about, happiness, satisfaction, fulfillment. It represents clarifying things. It represents illumination. It could also represent becoming consciously aware of something that you were not aware of before. Right? So there is that. Also, too, this card is about personal freedom. So I'm going to go back to the idea of where I talked about this person achieving some kind of independence, because that's being repeated here. But with the shine card in particular, the shine card is saying issues and events are going to be taking place in our lives this week, because it's going to be fostering this greater sense of awareness, but also about removing personal blocks. I talked about the idea about a grief therapist, or a grief counselor, something of that nature. I tend to look at this card as the psychologist card. Right? So this is about removing any and all psychological blocks. So that could be where we are putting our energy. Going back to the very first card, the foundation card, our energy this week is about clearing things up, removing any and all possible blocks that are keeping us from being happy, satisfied, and fulfilled in our lives this week. So on that note, I will go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I close, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a tarot-tastic week filled with love in all its possible forms and expressions. Take care.